So, Mike, Darren Agu, now committed to Vanderbilt, former defensive end commit who initially picked Notre Dame in April, not too long after receiving an offer from the Irish in March. Open it up to you to kind of talk about what really went down here and what led to Agu not being a part of Notre Dame's class anymore.
Yeah, like the first thing I want to touch on, because I don't want to forget to say this, is like when Agu committed, we did videos and podcasts and articles, all this stuff, being like, this is such a great get for Notre Dame. I feel like I'd be an absolute fraud and phony if I then came on here and was like, it's not a, this is no deal at all. Like, he was a good player then, and he's still a really good player. This is not a situation where Notre Dame just didn't want him in the class anymore and dropped him like that. That is not what happened here. Like Darren Agu still has not been to campus at Notre Dame. He was going to visit that June 14th midweek official visit period where Tyson Ford and Jalen Sneed were also on campus. That wasn't able to work because he was back in Ireland, and I believe his dad couldn't go, so they just didn't make that happen. Then he was going to visit June 25th weekend. That also fell through. So I think part of it was he wasn't able to get on campus. I think maybe part of it was that Notre Dame has such a strong defensive line class around him, and then the 2023 class with Keon Keeley and Brennan Vernon getting things started strong. I think maybe that scared him off in terms of being able to play freshman sophomore year, and then Vanderbilt, another high academic school that came on strong here in the past month or two. Clark Lee pulling one over Notre Dame. I also want to say that even though he is no longer in the class, like he is a good player, I feel like has the potential to play in the NFL. This is not a groundbreaking decommitment loss for Notre Dame. Like, yes, it is a loss, and I'd be a phony if I said it wasn't. But with the way Mike Elston is recruiting the defensive line, like Agu, decommitting to me is not a huge loss, which is how well stockpiled it is. And mentioning those 23 defensive ends already committed, having Tyson Ford and Aiden Gobira already committed at defensive end, I think that Notre Dame's going to be in just fine shape here.
Yeah, all I would add is that it would be kind of the same thing when he committed. We talked about taking him at that moment versus waiting a little bit to see if they can get some higher rate target like DJ Wesolak, the 4-star defensive end from Missouri. And we talked about why this was a good move to take Agu now because of his upside, because he wanted in. So to act like we didn't say any of that or say it was a nice get and a good decision to take him then, and then say, oh well, nothing, no big deal now would be contradictory. So yes, I'm right with you there, and that I would be a fool to say that after what we talked about earlier on. But yes, from a pure depth chart perspective, losing one defensive end in the 22 class and then who's coming now in 2023, don't think it'll kill him. Although I think you could say that if you were to pull any one of the other defensive linemen out of the 22 class, or even had Keon Keeley not committed or anything like that. So survivable, I think. But yeah, this was a player with a lot of upside and one that we thought was a good decision to take then. So yes, absolutely a loss.
Yeah, I think if Ford decommitted or maybe even go Byra for the 22s, I think that might have been even more impactful than Agu. Partly even because the strong connections that have been built with the 2022s. A lot of these guys have been committed for a while and have now been able to visit together. Agu, the one guy who hadn't been on campus yet, whether it was a self-guided tour or visiting in June. So, but yeah, that was an interesting point you just brought up.
And I'll let you discuss how related this was, but right before Agu decommitted, I think it was
day before.
Day before, Notre Dame sent out a new defensive line offer in 2022, and that was to defensive tackle Hero KANU, number 82 or 80 overall player in the 2022 class, from Germany, goes to high school in Southern California. Mike, he told you that Notre Dame would be instant contender for him. So I know it's a later offer than most, especially for a top 100 player. And not to say that this was, oh, Notre Dame is late, blah, blah, blah. This is terrible. But just fact of the matter compared to who else has entered its recruitment, it's later. What do you think about Notre Dame's chances here?
Yeah, yeah. So when Notre Dame offered Kelvin Gilliam, remember the Oklahoma commit last year in like October or something, like that one was really late. Like Notre Dame still was almost able to flip him, but he stuck with the Sooners. That's what this one reminded me of. But this is several months earlier. Looking at these timelines, so yeah, KANU though, I think he picked up his first offers early in 2020, and then he didn't really start blowing up until this spring. So when I talked to him the day he got his offer, I asked him, "Hey, is Notre Dame a little bit late to the party?" He laughed at me, like he really did laugh. He was like, "Heck no." Notre Dame has always been one of my favorite schools, so this is definitely going to be an interesting recruitment to watch. Talked about the July 27th barbecue, Patrick. I think he is someone to keep an eye on. Um, you know, Booking travel from Southern California, which I would imagine that's where he's at right now, to South Bend. I can't imagine that's, he the last time I checked in with him, I believe it was on Monday. He hadn't booked that yet. I can't imagine that's a great thing to book a week in advance. I'm coming up to South Bend soon, and it's much longer than a week in advance, and that was even tough from Atlanta, which is such a hub. But besides the point, that is. But as far as Notre Dame's chances here, if he does visit at the end of July, that is a big step for the Fighting Irish here. See future cast picks in 100% for Ohio State. Definitely has some big time offers going to pull up for YouTube folks. His top schools list. It was interesting. He told me basically that he announced that he was dropping a top 10 schools list, but then only had 9 schools in it. And that was basically because he wanted Notre Dame in there. So there's the top 10: Alabama, Clemson, Washington, Georgia, Oklahoma, LSU, Texas, USC, Ohio State. That's the who's who of college football right there. So that's 9 schools, but he says personal top 10, and then added a couple of days later a Notre Dame logo, basically saying, hey, Notre Dame's in there now. So I thought that was kind of cool. But if he gets on campus, I think that'll be a great first step. If he doesn't, I still think Notre Dame's got a good shot here because, he's going to take an official visit in the fall most likely, and he's not deciding until, December, January anyways. December. I think he's announcing at the All-American Bowl in January, and will probably make a decision December and silently, sign or whatever you want to call it. Before then. So he is just one of a few defensive linemen to keep an eye on. But I also wouldn't rule out Notre Dame just signing 3, although I think it's more likely they sign 4.
Are you ready for the hero puns if he commits, or if Notre Dame is even on a hat on the table in that decision?
I need a hero. That song's just going to be... I can see the Notre Dame staff tweeting out part of that music video or something. That would not shock me.
You know how they've been doing those really subtle references to, I don't know if you've seen it for the last 2, or at least our listeners and
the
viewers,
Brian Polian one.
Yeah, those really subtle things. I guarantee you, or that song is the favorite, if not one of the favorites to be some coaching staff members subtle tweet of, hey, we just got this commitment.
Yeah.
Or just a pun on his name.
I'm all
here
for
that one too.
All for it.
Never get tired of him. Anyway, you mentioned 4 defensive linemen. Notre Dame got a commitment, or has commitments, I should say, from a couple of guys already at defensive end. Rivals 250 players: Aiden Gobira, Tyson Ford. Of course, still pursuing Anthony Lucas. Has a commitment from Donovan Heinisch, defensive tackle. How do you see that position playing out the rest of the cycle now with KANU on the target board with an offer?
Yeah, you mentioned Anthony Lucas. This is a guy I've been saying for a really long time. It's just going to be too good for Notre Dame to pass up, really, no matter where things stand. He's going to be someone that, they'll fit in. They absolutely love Anthony Lucas. Notre Dame's always felt optimistic is the best word to say, but, when, Alabama and, Miami, I believe that's where his dad went to school. Texas A&M, those schools got official visits. Of course, Notre Dame got one as well. So um, Anthony Lucas, big end or three technique, just get him in. That's basically where Notre Dame's at with Lucas. Cyrus Moss, definitely still keep an eye on him. Number 89 overall player in the country. He's definitely that Viper defensive end. Notre Dame will go the distance with him. And how about an old name to resurface? DJ Wesolak from Boonville, Missouri. Notre Dame is back in some contact with him. He's still taking his recruitment the distance, so Irish might have a little bit of catch up to do here, and maybe I don't know if there needs to be smoothing things over or from either part. I don't know, but I've heard from multiple sources that Notre Dame is back in some contact with DJ Wesolak. So also another factor here in all of these different options is seeing players' senior season, like who develops and impresses the staff. Maybe some guys that they're keeping an eye on that want to see senior film, or just some guys that they've never heard of before that just emerge onto the scene. But I think one thing is it's kind of like in Mike Elston and Marcus Freeman, we trust with the defensive line. They'll get things figured out.